Welcome to another episode of Natalie Jackson, Plant Detective. That's me. I'm here to answer your questions about plants. Owning plants and nurturing plants is a wonderful way to stay connected with the planet and with nature. And I'm here to make sure that you all have the support you need to raise your plant babies. So we have questions from 4 lovely people today. 2 are from my website, which was very exciting. I set up a form on my website where you can upload images and send your questions on cultivatelovela.com. So thank you for using the form. It's very exciting. And the other 2 people, of course, just sent me questions through the DMs on Natalie Cultivates on Instagram or on Facebook. So feel free to do either one if you have a plant question. My first question comes from Rachel in Echo Park. She's got lots of questions. And actually, today's episode features 2 different Rachels from Echo Park, so get ready. So Rachel Q has a question about her artichoke. She says that her artichoke plant she bought this year, and it's not doing so well. She harvested 2 artichokes from it, and it's not giving her anything else. It doesn't look like it's thriving, and she's pretty worried about it. So the noises you hear in the background are the birds in my neighborhood. They are fun and loud. So moving on, back to Rachel's artichoke plant. I would say anything that looks dead, like totally dead brown, cut it off. And definitely see that, you're watering it all the way so that the water drains out of the bottom. But don't be worried. So artichokes definitely grow better in a cooler climate, so you can move your artichoke into a shadier spot where it only gets a little bit of sunshine and more shade and see how that does. I have very little experience successfully growing artichokes just because in my garden plot the ants tend to come and eat everything that is fleshy and delicious, like artichokes and corn. And as we know, ants are rude. So we've kind of given up, but there are people in the community garden plot that have artichokes that grow wild. And I took a picture of this one, which I thought was just so beautiful. So the bottom of the picture you can see is the flowering artichoke plant. If you don't harvest your artichoke before it flowers, then it's not edible. So if you want to eat it, you want to harvest it before it flowers. But if you appreciate the beauty of these gorgeous purple flowers, some people grow them for the flowers and cut them and use them in bouquets and arrangements. I also just loved how it was juxtaposed against the purple jacaranda tree, which was in full bloom. And I am definitely a purple person, if you cannot tell. So this picture, I just had to take it. The scene totally caught my eye, and I thought it was so beautiful. Now, these are artichoke plants that are in the ground, and they basically grow wild. They're usually in full sun, but at the end of the day, they are in the shade like this. It does seem like historically artichokes grow better in cooler climates, so having it in a pot on your patio against wall may make it a little hotter, so maybe move it into the shadier spot. That might help, Rachel. If you plant an artichoke plant in the ground, it can last for 5 years if you water and fertilize it well. So this is probably just year 1 of this artichoke plant's life. Because it's in a container, I don't know if it'll do a full 5 years, but it should definitely do at least a few more years. The other thing you want to do with this plant is if you start noticing the roots are growing out of the bottom, that means the plant has overgrown the container, and you may want to repot it into a bigger container. Because it's a perennial plant, like I said, it'll keep growing for many years. But I do believe that misting the leaves with a little bit of water once you move it into a shadier spot will help. Just keep it cooler and it'll feel like almost as if it's in a cooler climate if it's in the shade and you give it the mist. So with this plant, I would say don't worry about just harvesting 2 this year. Keep it going, and next year you should definitely get more than 2. So keep fertilizing it, especially during the flowering season. Rachel, I hope this helps. Don't get sad that the plant looks sad. Just keep giving it what it needs, and because it's a perennial, it'll take it a little while to really like form into its adult self. Right now it's kind of like the child teenage self. So the fact that you got 2 artichokes is already pretty good. So, and then Rachel had a second question about putting mulch in her garden. She has an area where she can plant in the ground, and here she has some strawberries and I believe some zucchini nearby. And she put straw on top of the soil. Straw is an excellent mulch. It helps keep the moisture in the ground. And so her question is, because she put this mulch on the ground, how does she know how to adjust her watering? You know, she visually can't necessarily see if the soil is wet. So what does she do? So I always love a good moisture meter. I tend to go through them because they are, you know, made of plastic and they kind of don't last very long. But if you can get a good one and take good care of it and not break it like I tend to do, it'll be your best friend, especially with the artichoke, even like a container garden. The other thing is everyone has a free water meter on them, and it is called your finger. So it doesn't go very deep, but if you can dig a little hole in the ground and stick your finger in, you can kind of gauge, okay, is the top couple inches wet or not? And that's how you should know to water. You really want to make sure that whatever area you're watering is able to drain and that you're not just waterlogging it by adding more and more and more and more water. But strawberries do like water, and they will probably go through pretty quickly because they're out there making berries for you. So especially when they're fruiting, you know, make sure you're fertilizing your strawberries, but the mulch is definitely an excellent way to help keep some of the moisture in the soil, help prevent the roots from drying out. But just do keep an eye on it and make sure that if you need to, you pull back some of that straw, stick your finger in or stick your moisture meter in and check out how deep the water goes. With a moisture meter, it's nice because usually they're about like 10 or 11 inches long, and you can drop it down and really see, okay, where is it really wet? Where is it a little drier? Because it tends to be that the bottom is the wettest and then it dries, you know, as it goes up. But it just depends on how you're watering. So I would recommend getting a moisture meter or just sticking your finger in to keep track of the watering. But you can also tell by the plant. The silly thing about plants is that usually the same signals that they give off for when they're low on water are the same as when they have too much water. So if they're giving you a signal, try to figure out if they have too much water or not enough water, and then go from there. And usually you know because you're the one watering. So Rachel, I hope this helps with your artichoke and your question about using straw as mulch. Make sure you're using straw and not hay, because hay has seeds and then you'll just be planting hay in your garden. So definitely use straw. If you can use organic straw, you know, straw that hasn't been treated with anything, that is absolutely the best. Usually if it's meant for feed, it's not treated, but you can ask wherever you go and just double check and make sure that it hasn't been treated with any different chemicals to make it last longer or whatever the chemicals are for. Yes, so Rachel, I hope this helps you, and good luck in the garden. Let me know, keep me posted on your artichoke success. This one is a slow grower at first, so we'll keep track of the progress. All right, and now for questions from Rachel A., also in Echo Park. So Rachel A. has been having an issue in the summertime with sunburn on her plants. Now she does have some lovely plants like this one. Let's see, let's get to the sunburned ones. Here we go. Okay. So for example, this gorgeous cactus isn't looking so good. Some of the stems have dried out, and it's exposed to direct sunlight in the afternoon, and this wall reflects the sunlight back at it, so it is a little crispy in some areas. So this cactus, you know, the summer's been pretty warm this year, so anything that is out that isn't really used to that kind of a sun and that kind of heat will get damaged this summer. All we can really do is kind of help it out a little bit here and there. Definitely for this specific plant, I would trim all the dead parts out. I am a dead plant part recycler, so I just cut it up and put it back into the soil, reuse the nutrients. Some people might compost it, whatever works for you, go for it. The main thing that you can do with plants that are getting sunburned is physically block the sun. So some people will install like rolling blinds that like roll down, and they can block the sunshine for a few hours and then roll it back up when it's done. Some people will put a shade cloth over their plants. This is really used with pepper plants I've seen in our community garden, because pepper plants, once they start growing, the flesh of the peppers are sensitive to the sun. And usually the plant will try to compensate by growing more leaves, but sometimes the pepper is still exposed and it'll get sunburned. So if you use some shade cloth, it's usually like a black cloth that's mesh, so sunlight can come through but not all of it, and it basically just dapples the sun a bit, gives it a little more shade, and makes it a little bit cooler around the plant. So that tends to help. I know I have a banana tree on my balcony. It's a little one, and it gets burned every summer. The leaves just crisp up, and we just cut off the dead parts, put it back in the planter, and try to protect it from the sun. I've used a cloth over the top of it in extreme weather, like when it's super, super hot or super, super windy. We've protected the banana tree that's on our balcony a few times. Balconies can be tough because they're usually made with cement or stucco or something that like absorbs heat, and then it just kind of radiates heat on your plants the whole time. So I've found that to be an issue with my banana tree on my balcony. As for this cactus, I do think it will survive this definitely. Just trim it up and water normally. Don't like give it extra water, and it should be okay. This is Rachel's rattlesnake plant that is getting a little crispy from being, I believe, indoors by the balcony. And again, with some of our indoor plants, we just move them away from the windows when it's this hot, especially if it's going to be over 90 degrees. We tend to move it away from the windows. If it's on the balcony, we do have an awning, so I'll try to kind of consolidate the more sensitive plants under the awning so they get a little sun, but not as much as they have been getting. But I do think, honestly, a cloth is the best thing you can do just to protect some of these plants. They do look a little crispy, but they will survive. The main thing, of course, is that the roots don't dry out, so make sure you're still watering your plant as normal. If it does look like the soil is drying out really fast, then increase the watering. But just know that some of the signs of drying out are similar to the signs of overwatering, so make sure you're checking the soil first before making the decision to add more water. Let's see. Yeah, these plants are pretty resilient, so you shouldn't have a problem. You can definitely cut off anything that is super dead, but if it has any green on it, it will still photosynthesize. So you know, if you want to make it look a little prettier, you can by cutting it up, but really I would wait until the whole leaf is dead before cutting anything off. Rachel also has a question about her succulents that have been on her balcony as well, saying they're looking a little leggy. And so you can see in this picture the stem is pretty bare on these succulents, and then the leaves are kind of clustered at the top. So to me, that means that this plant was probably completely dried out at one point, and it lost all the leaves that were on the bottom part of the stem. So because of that, you know, it does look this way. And if you don't like how it looks, you can repot it and pot the full stem further down into the soil. And then, you know, rearrange everything so it has more full look. A lot of my succulents look like this just because of, you know, when I went on vacation or whatever, and, you know, or even if they've outgrown their pot, they'll tend to look like this. So it may be a good time to repot these succulents. Succulents are pretty easy to repot. You don't really have to be extra sensitive with them. You don't even really have to leave like actual roots. If you keep the soil wet enough when you first plant it, it'll form its own new roots. You can also just plant the leaves of the succulent and that will grow new plants as well. So, you know, here's a different angle where you can see, okay, yeah, maybe it doesn't look so great. But it is definitely alive. This is definitely a survival tactic for when it does dry out. It just drops the leaves it can't maintain and it keeps the leaves that it can until it gets more water to be able to keep growing. So yes, if it looks leggy, I would say repot it. If you don't like the way it looks, and you can pot everything closer together and then it'll grow back up and looking a lot more full. And you know, these guys look good. These guys typically, they could be a little more full, but I think just, you know, the amount of space they probably have in the pot itself isn't very much. So it would be a similar thing. If you want to repot it, you can. But these guys look cute. I wouldn't necessarily change it. Same with this one. This one looks fine to me. You know, it's just the same thing. If you see any dead leaves, cut them off, drop them into the pot, cut them up, let the soil, you know, kind of absorb those nutrients so that the roots can take them back in. But the plants look good overall. They're still alive, and that's what's important in this summer heat, because a lot of plants do tend to die this time of year, or at least die back. So it looks like you're doing a great job of being a plant parent and being attentive to these plants. And I know that you inherited these plants, Rachel, so you're doing a great job. Like, don't worry about it. They're growing. You know, just keep trimming them up, give them a little water here and there when necessary, and they'll keep growing. So Rachel, you're doing great. Don't get down, don't despair, and keep growing your plants. And I'd love to see some update photos, especially as we move out of summer. See if we can get some new growth in the fall. That'll be awesome. And if you do repot those succulents, let me know. I want to see a picture. All right, so the next question is from Veronica, who submitted this question through my website. Thank you. And so she has a gorgeous bamboo plant indoors, which is good, in a container. Very good. And she, you know, she kind of experimented a little bit with it, and she looked it up, and it looks like the plant didn't really want to be in direct sunlight. So, you know, it was a little crispy. She moved it away from the sunlight, and now it's doing better. And it's pretty clear from the position it was in that the leaves that were in direct sunlight were suffering. So, good move there to move it to the shade. These are, from what I can tell from these photos, this is a big leaved bamboo. And I'm going to try to say the Latin name. It is Indocalamus tessellatus. And it is listed as very shade tolerant. So yes, I don't think it wants to be in the sun at all. It is great in containers, so it's a good thing you have it in a container. And I know you got this as a cutting from a friend. So your concern, Veronica, was about this region down here where there's a little bit of browning and scarring on the bottom of the plants. I believe, just from kind of poking around a little bit, that this is relatively normal. It appears to me that this part of the plant was below the level of the rocks when you initially got it, and as it grew up. So I think it may just be like kind of a calcification from the rocks, like minerals from the rocks and from when you water. So I think it's fine. I don't think it'll cause any long-term damage. And the good thing about bamboo, of course, is that it's super resilient. I would keep an eye on the bottom of the container and see how the roots are doing. If you have a hole in the bottom of the container and the roots are like jamming out through that hole, it is time to repot. And you can split these up and give them away if you want, or have more containers filled with bamboo, because it is such a beautiful plant. If you have a part of your backyard that you want to fill with bamboo, just plant one of these, and in a couple of years you'll have a full hedge of bamboo. They take over pretty quickly. If you don't want bamboo taking over your whole backyard, do not plant it in the ground, plant it in a container. I would say cut off any dead parts. It's kind of my theme here. Cut off the dead parts, recycle them back into the soil, and then the rest of it will be encouraged to keep growing. I don't think there are any major issues here. This plant looks gorgeous. Indoor plants, the only other thing to keep in mind for their health is to dust them. So just take like a wet paper towel or washcloth and just dust the leaves, because if there is dust on the leaves, they do have a harder time photosynthesizing and really breathing, because you're kind of like clogging their pores with the dust. So I highly recommend that. Otherwise, I think it's looking really good. I think you made the perfect move of getting it out of the sunlight, and it should grow really well. And keep in mind that with bamboo, you do need to repot it, so just make sure that once it outgrows that container, you split it up and start all over again. So yeah, it looks really good. Any dead leaves, put them back into the soil for a little nitrogen boost, and it should be good. I'm really proud of you, Veronica. This looks really great. All right. And my last question of the day is from Caren. She also submitted her question through my website, and she actually asked a question about these plants in my last video. And so the question for today is, how often should she spray water her succulents, and is it bad if they are in a room without much sunlight? Overwatering is the most common cause of death for succulent houseplants. So as long as you're not overwatering them, they should be fine. Most of them are very drought tolerant and really just want a little bit of water here and there. You do just want to make sure that whatever you're spraying, that the water does go down into the soil to the roots. Sometimes when you spray a plant, it stays on the leaves, which is not bad, but the main part that we want to make sure we water is the roots. And we want to make sure that water doesn't evaporate before it gets to the roots. Now, a lot of succulents are shaped in a way where if they do get wet, the water funnels right down to the root system. So it's good to just, make sure you see the water go to the soil. And as for not having sunlight, the plants that you have here, these two in particular, don't necessarily need a lot of sunlight. They're called Haworthias, and they prefer having some shade, and they do better indoors than most succulents. So if you're asking specifically about these, I would say they're fine. Other succulents will probably want a little more sunshine depending on which ones you get. So what you can do, I know you're in Massachusetts, so some of them, what you could do is in the later afternoon, put them outside for a little sunshine. Avoid like the super harsh, like noon to 1 o'clock, like directly above your head sunshine, and wait until it kind of starts to pass down towards sunset and give it a little bit of that sunshine instead, just because it's a little less harsh and they're used to being indoors. You can do that in the summer for a couple hours here and there just to see, you might get a little more growth, you might get a little, a brighter color in your plant. So just keep that in mind. And really, the Haworthias, you don't need to do that. If you put them in a shady room with a little bit of indirect sunlight, they'll be fine. But other species, you definitely want to put them outside for a bit. And I know in Massachusetts you have harsh winters, so I'm sure these succulents are so happy to be inside when it is really, really cold outside. Yes, so Caren, you're doing great with your plants. I would love to see you grow your plant collection, so send me any photos if you get any new plants and if you have any questions about those. And that is it. We've come to the end of another episode of Natalie Jackson, Plant Detective. I hope you are learning and growing as much as I am, researching your questions. And next episode will be featuring flowers that I took pictures of in Hawaii when I went to visit Caren. So I was in Oahu and Kauai, and I got to visit a few botanical gardens. So I will be sharing some photos of those and telling you a little more about them. And part of what I love about Southern California is that a lot of the plants that I saw in Hawaii actually do well out here in Southern California. So there will be some familiar flowers and some specifically tropical flowers as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please feel free to send your plant questions over to me at Natalie Cultivates on Instagram and Facebook, and through my website, cultivatelovela.com. I hope you have a great day. Keep growing, keep planting, bring those plants to your home, and I hope to hear from you soon. Thank you. Have a lovely day, Earthlings.